I sat in my car outside my architecture firm at 2 in the morning, staring at blueprints for the community center project I had been developing for 3 years. My phone buzzed with another text from my wife, Sarah. The job offer in Seattle expires tomorrow. Choose me or your stupid building project. I had spent the last 5 years building my reputation as a sustainable architect in Austin, finally landing the contract that could change everything. But Sarah received an offer to join a prestigious marketing firm in Seattle, and she was demanding I abandon my dream to follow hers. The harsh glow from my phone screen illuminated the detailed drawings scattered across my dashboard, each line representing months of careful planning and community input. Outside the construction site stood silent under streetlights, waiting for tomorrow's work to continue. Inside my chest, my heart pounded as I realized my marriage was crumbling around the very foundation I had worked so hard to build. Earlier that evening, I had walked through our apartment door with excitement bubbling in my chest, ready to share the incredible news with Sarah. The Austin City Council had unanimously approved my community center design after months of presentations and revisions. This project represented everything I had worked toward since graduating from architecture school 7 years ago. "Sarah, you will not believe what happened today," I called out, dropping my portfolio by the entrance and loosening my tie. The apartment felt unusually quiet, with only the soft clicking of keyboard keys coming from the living room. She sat curled on our second-hand couch laptop, balanced on her knees, barely glancing up when I entered. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore the oversized University of Texas sweatshirt I had given her for Christmas 2 years earlier. The television played some reality show on mute in the background. The city council voted unanimously to move forward with the community center. I continued settling beside her with a wide grin. "Maria says construction can begin next month. This is going to provide jobs for so many local workers, and the green space will give kids in the neighborhood somewhere safe to play and learn." Sarah's fingers paused on the keyboard for just a moment before resuming their rapid tapping. "That sounds nice," she murmured without looking up from her screen. "Listen, I need to tell you something important." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I studied her profile, noting the way she avoided my gaze and the tension in her shoulders. "What is it?" "I got a call today from Pinnacle Marketing in Seattle," she said finally, closing the laptop and turning to face me. Her green eyes held an intensity I had not seen before. "They want me to join their senior strategy team. It is a huge opportunity, Grayson. We are talking about a 6-figure salary, stock options, and a clear path to partnership." My excitement about the community center began to dim as I processed her words. "That is amazing, honey. When would they need an answer, you?" "Tomorrow," she replied quickly. "And they need me to start in 2 weeks. 2 weeks." I sat back, trying to wrap my mind around the timeline. That seems incredibly fast for such a big decision. "Have you been talking to them for a while?" Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly and she looked away. "I may have had a few preliminary conversations over the past few months. Nothing serious until today." "A few months." The words hit me like cold water. "You have been interviewing with companies in Seattle for months and never mentioned it." "It was not really interviewing," she said defensively. "More like networking. You know how the marketing world works. But today they made an official offer, and it is incredible, Grayson. This could set us up for life." I tried to process this information while my mind raced with questions. What about my firm? What about the community center project? I have contracts, obligations to the community, to my business partner, Jake. Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "You can do architecture anywhere. There are plenty of firms in Seattle that would love to have someone with your experience. I already did some research, and the market there is booming. But this is not just any project," I explained, leaning forward and taking her hands in mine. "This community center represents everything my father believed in before he died. Safe working conditions, good jobs for local people, green space for underprivileged kids. The city council named it after him, Sarah. They want to call it the Robert Parker Community Development Center." For a brief moment, I thought I saw something soften in her expression, but it quickly hardened again as she pulled her hands away. "I understand that this project means a lot to you," she said carefully. "But we have to think about our future together. This Seattle opportunity could open doors I have been working toward my entire career. I need to know that my husband supports my dreams, too." The way she said it made me feel selfish for even considering the impact on my own work. I had always tried to be supportive of Sarah's ambitions, celebrating her promotions and encouraging her professional development. But this felt different somehow. "Of course, I support your dreams," I said, "but can we at least discuss the timing? Maybe see if they would be willing to wait a few months for you to start. The community center groundbreaking is scheduled for next month, and I cannot just abandon the project now." Sarah's laptop chimed with an incoming video call notification. She glanced at the screen, and her expression brightened immediately. "Actually, that is Derek Morrison from Pinnacle," she said, opening the laptop again. "He wants to discuss some final details about the position. This will just take a minute." I watched as Sarah accepted the call, her demeanor completely transforming. Her voice became more animated, her smile wider, and she unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The man on the screen appeared to be in his early 40s with perfectly styled dark hair and an expensive suit. "Sarah, so good to see you again." Derek's voice carried through the laptop speakers. "I hope you have had time to consider our offer." "I have, and I am incredibly excited about the opportunity," Sarah replied. "I was just discussing the logistics with my husband." Derek's gaze shifted toward me, and I caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like amusement in his eyes. "Ah, the architect. Sarah has told me so much about your work. I am sure you understand how important this move is for Sarah's career trajectory." "Nice to meet you," I said, feeling oddly like an outsider in my own living room. "Sarah mentioned the position sounds like an amazing opportunity." "Oh, it absolutely is." Derek continued, his attention returning to Sarah. "We have big plans for you here, Sarah. The kind of projects that could make you a household name in the marketing world. Of course, timing is everything in this business. Opportunities like this do not wait around." After the call ended, Sarah closed the laptop with a satisfied expression. "Derek is brilliant," she said. "He has already outlined a 5-year career plan for me that could lead to my own agency. He seems very invested in your success," I observed, though something about the interaction left me unsettled. "He believes in my potential," Sarah replied, "unlike some people who think I should be content with my current position forever." "That is not fair," I said. "I have always supported your career goals. I just think we need to consider all the factors before making such a huge decision." Sarah stood up abruptly, her expression hardening. "The factors. The only factor that matters is whether you love me enough to support this opportunity. I am not asking you to give up architecture forever, Grayson. I am asking you to relocate your hobby business so we can build a real future together." Hobby business. The word stung more than I expected. "Sarah, my firm employs 12 people. We have contracts worth over $2 million. This is not a hobby. Compared to what I could be earning in Seattle, it might as well be," she replied coldly. "Derek says the average salary for senior marketing strategists there is almost double what you make from your little construction projects." I stared at her, wondering when my wife had become someone who measured love in salary figures and dismissed my life's work as insignificant. The woman I married 3 years ago had seemed proud of my commitment to sustainable architecture and community development. "I need some air," I said, standing and grabbing my keys. "Where are you going?" Sarah called after me. "To think," I replied, pausing at the door, "about a lot of things." As I drove through the empty Austin streets toward my office, my phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages from Sarah. Each one grew more demanding and less understanding. The final message sent as I pulled into the parking lot contained the ultimatum that would change everything. "The job offer expires tomorrow. Choose me or your stupid building project." I sat in my car surrounded by the blueprints and dreams I had spent years developing, wondering how love had become a choice between abandoning my purpose and losing my marriage. The worst part was realizing that Sarah had been planning this moment for months, building her escape route while I believed we were building a life together. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as I pulled into the parking lot of Parker and Morrison Architects. I had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how my marriage had reached this breaking point. As I approached the building, I noticed an unfamiliar silver sedan parked in the visitor space. Walking through the front door, I heard voices coming from the conference room. Jake's deep baritone mixed with a higher, more animated tone that made my stomach drop. Through the glass walls, I could see my business partner seated across from Sarah, papers spread between them on the polished table. "Good morning," I said, stepping into the room and trying to keep my voice steady. "I did not expect to see you here so early, Sarah." She looked up with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. "I thought it would be helpful to discuss some practical matters with Jake while you were getting ready for work. He has been so understanding about our situation." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. At 35, my business partner carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers before joining me to start the firm. His usually steady demeanor seemed strained this morning. "Grayson, we need to talk," Jake said, his weathered hands folded on the table. "Sarah mentioned that you might be interested in selling your partnership share and relocating to Seattle. She mentioned what—" I looked between them, feeling like I had walked into a conversation that had been scripted without my input. "I was just explaining the logistics," Sarah said smoothly. "If we decide to move forward with the Seattle opportunity, it would make sense to liquidate your portion of the business. Jake could buy you out or bring in a new partner. It happens all the time in professional partnerships." Jake's expression told me he was hearing this for the first time too. "Look, buddy, if you want to explore other opportunities, I respect that. But the community center project is set to break ground next month. We have commitments to the city, to the contractors, to the neighborhood. We cannot just walk away from that." "I have no intention of walking away from anything," I said firmly, taking a seat at the table. "Sarah, I think you misunderstood our conversation last night. I never said I wanted to sell the business." Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "I must have gotten ahead of myself," she said. "I just want to make sure we explore all our options. Speaking of which, I took the liberty of reaching out to a few architecture firms in Seattle. They are very interested in meeting with you." "You did what?" "Just preliminary inquiries," she said quickly. "Brockman and Associates, Cascade Design Group, and Northwest Sustainable Architecture. All of them have projects that align with your interests in community development and green building." I stared at her, trying to process how much planning she had done without involving me. "When did you contact these firms?" "Yesterday afternoon after our conversation," Sarah replied. "I wanted to show you that there are real opportunities waiting in Seattle. Derek even put in a good word for you with some of his connections in the development sector." The mention of Derek's name sent a chill down my spine. "You discussed my career prospects with your new boss." "Future boss," Sarah corrected. "And yes, he was very helpful. He understands how important it is for couples to support each other's professional growth." Jake cleared his throat. "Grayson, I think Sarah and I should give you some space to process this information, but I want you to know that whatever you decide, we will work it out professionally." After Jake left the conference room, Sarah and I sat in silence for several minutes. The rain had intensified outside, drumming against the windows and casting shifting shadows across the architectural models displayed on the shelves. "You scheduled phone calls with Seattle firms without asking me?" I said finally. "I was trying to be helpful," Sarah replied. "You seemed so worried about finding work in Seattle, so I wanted to show you that your concerns were unfounded." "My concerns are not about finding work," I said. "My concerns are about abandoning a project that matters to me, to the community, and to the memory of my father." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Huh. I know your father's death was hard on you. but you cannot spend your whole life trying to honor a man who died 10 years ago. At some point, you have to focus on building a future with your wife. The casual dismissal of my father's influence hit me like a physical blow. Robert Parker had died in a construction accident when unsafe working conditions caused a scaffold collapse. His death had inspired my focus on sustainable architecture that prioritized worker safety and community benefit. The community center represented everything he had believed in, but never lived to see. "This is not about living in the past," I said. "This is about building something meaningful for the future." The community center will serve hundreds of families, provide job training programs, offer childcare services, and create green space in a neighborhood that has been neglected for decades. "And that is very noble," Sarah replied. "But Seattle could offer us opportunities to make a much bigger impact." Derek's firm works with Fortune 500 companies on campaigns that reach millions of people. Imagine what we could accomplish with that kind of platform and resources. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Maria Santos, the project manager for the community center. I answered quickly, grateful for the interruption. "Grayson, I am so glad I caught you." Maria's warm voice carried genuine excitement. "I have wonderful news about the project. The neighborhood association met last night and they voted unanimously on something special." "What kind of special?" I asked, putting the call on speaker so Sarah could hear. "They want to name the community center after your father," Maria said. "The Robert Parker Community Development Center. They know about his construction background and how his values inspired your approach to this project. They think it is the perfect way to honor both his memory and your commitment to the neighborhood." I felt tears well up in my eyes as the significance of Maria's words sank in. The community wanted to memorialize my father's legacy through the very project Sarah was asking me to abandon. "Grayson, are you there?" Maria continued. "I know this might be emotional news, but I hope you understand how much respect the community has for your family and your work." "I am here," I managed to say. "This is incredible news, Maria. Thank you for calling." After ending the call, I looked at Sarah, hoping to see some understanding in her expression. Instead, I found irritation and impatience. "They want to name the building after your father," she said flatly. "Yes," I replied. "The Robert Parker Community Development Center." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the rain. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a tone I had never heard before. "Derek was right about you," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "He said that some people get so attached to small local projects that they lose sight of bigger opportunities. He said it is a form of fear, actually. Fear of competing on a larger stage where the stakes are higher." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You discussed my psychology with your future boss." "We discussed the challenges of relocating when one partner is resistant to change," Sarah replied. "Derek has seen it before with other employees. He says it is usually about insecurity rather than genuine passion for the work." The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Sarah had not just been networking with Seattle companies. She had been building a narrative about our relationship, painting me as the obstacle to her success, and Derek as the wise counselor helping her navigate the situation. "How long have you been talking to Derek about our marriage?" I asked. Sarah's cheeks flushed, but her voice remained steady. "We have discussed the practical aspects of the relocation. He understands how difficult these transitions can be for families." "And what did you tell him about me?" "I told him the truth," she said. "That you are talented but sometimes lack vision for your own potential. That you get emotionally attached to projects in ways that cloud your business judgment." I stared at her, wondering when my wife had become someone who would share intimate details of our relationship with a man she barely knew. The woman sitting across from me looked like Sarah, but her words and actions felt like those of a stranger. "I need to check on some things at the construction site," I said, standing and gathering the community center blueprints from the table. "Grayson, wait," Sarah called after me. "We need to make a decision about Seattle today." "No," I said, pausing at the doorway. "You need to make a decision about Seattle. I already know what matters most to me." As I walked out of the office, I heard Sarah's phone ring. Through the glass wall, I could see her answer with the same bright smile she had used during yesterday's video call with Derek. I realized that while I had been planning our future together, Sarah had been planning her escape route complete with professional and personal justification for leaving me behind. The construction site buzzed with activity despite the morning drizzle. Workers in yellow hard hats moved purposefully around the foundation that had been poured 3 weeks earlier. The skeletal frame of what would become the Robert Parker Community Development Center rose from the concrete, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. I parked my truck near the temporary site office and sat for a moment watching the controlled chaos of construction. Tommy Rodriguez, barely 19 years old, carried rebar with careful precision under the watchful eye of Frank Butler, the site foreman who had worked alongside my father 15 years ago. The sight of Frank's grizzled face and careful attention to safety protocols brought a flood of memories rushing back. "Grayson," Tommy called out when he spotted me approaching. "Did you hear about the naming ceremony? My girlfriend Jessica is so excited. She says this center is going to change everything for families in the neighborhood." "I heard," I replied, shaking hands with the young man whose calloused palms told the story of someone learning honest work. "How are things going with the foundation supports?" "Frank has us double-checking every measurement," Tommy said with a grin. "Says your dad would have done it the same way. Measure twice, install once, and never compromise on safety." Frank Butler emerged from behind a stack of steel beams, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw me. At 57, Frank carried himself with the dignity of someone who had spent 4 decades in construction, without ever cutting corners or compromising his principles. "Your old man would be proud of this project," Frank said, gesturing toward the rising structure. "Safe working conditions, fair wages, and something that will serve the community for generations. That is exactly what Robert believed construction should accomplish." We walked through the site together as Frank explained the progress on various systems. The foundation included innovative drainage solutions that would prevent flooding during Texas storms. The frame incorporated sustainable materials that would reduce long-term maintenance costs. Every detail reflected the values my father had instilled in me about building things that lasted and served their communities well. "Frank, can I ask you something about my father?" I said as we paused near the area that would become the main entrance. "Course you can," Frank replied. "What is on your mind? Did he ever talk about dreams about wanting to build something bigger than just individual projects?" Frank leaned against a concrete pillar, his expression growing thoughtful. "Your dad had big dreams, Grayson. He used to talk about creating a construction company that prioritized worker safety and community benefit over pure profit. He wanted to prove that you could make good money while doing right by people." "What happened to those dreams?" "Life happened," Frank said simply. "Your mom was pregnant, bills needed paying, and your dad took the jobs that were available rather than holding out for the perfect opportunity. But he never stopped believing that construction could be a force for good in communities." I thought about Sarah's dismissal of the community center as a small local project, and Derek's analysis of my lack of vision. From their perspective, perhaps my work did seem limited in scope. But standing on this construction site, surrounded by workers who were earning steady wages and building something meaningful, I understood that sometimes the most important work happens on a local scale. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Sarah called me this morning. She is worried about you. Can we talk?" I called Linda Parker immediately, knowing that Sarah's manipulation had likely extended to my family relationships as well. "Mom, what did Sarah tell you?" "She said you are having trouble making decisions about your future." Linda's voice carried the concern of a mother who had already lost her husband to the dangerous realities of construction work. "She mentioned that you might be obsessing over the community center project in unhealthy ways." "Did she explain what the community center represents?" "She said it is a nice local project, but that you are turning down better opportunities because you cannot let go of the past." I felt anger rising in my chest at how Sarah had twisted the truth to manipulate my mother's fears. Linda Parker had worked 2 cleaning jobs for 15 years to support our family after my father's death. She understood better than anyone the importance of meaningful work and community responsibility. "Mom, the community is naming the center after Dad," I said, "the Robert Parker Community Development Center. They want to honor his memory and the values he stood for." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. When Linda finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "They want to name it after your father." "Yes, Mom, because this project represents everything he believed in. Safe working conditions, good jobs for local people, and construction that serves the community rather than just generating profit." "Sarah did not mention that," Linda said quietly. "She made it sound like you were clinging to an old project instead of moving forward with your life." "Can you come to the construction site?" I asked. "I would like to show you what we are building here." 40 minutes later, Linda Parker arrived at the construction site wearing the same kind of practical clothing she had worn to clean office buildings for the past decade and a half. At 58, my mother carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who had raised a son alone while working multiple jobs to pay for his education. Tommy immediately approached when he saw her arrive. "Mrs. Parker, I am so honored to meet you," he said respectfully. "Your son is giving me the kind of opportunity my father never had. Steady work, safety training, and skills I can use to build a career." As we toured the site, Linda's eyes filled with tears as she began to understand the scope of what we were creating. The community center would include job training programs, childcare services, a health clinic, and green space for neighborhood children to play safely. Every aspect of the design prioritized long-term community benefit over short-term profit. "This is what your father dreamed about," she said, stopping in front of the area where a bronze plaque would eventually commemorate Robert Parker's commitment to worker safety and community development. "He always said construction should leave places better than you found them." Frank joined us as we stood looking at the foundation of what would become the main community gathering space. "Robert would have loved this project," he told Linda. "Every safety protocol, every material choice, every design decision reflects the values he tried to live by." "Sarah does not understand what this means to our family," Linda said finally. "She sees it as just another construction project, but this is about honoring your father's legacy and continuing his work." My phone buzzed with another call from Sarah. I let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on the conversation with my mother and the sounds of construction happening around us. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt a sense of peace and clarity about what mattered most. "Mom, I want you to know that I am not having a breakdown or obsessing unhealthily over this project," I said. "I am trying to build something meaningful that honors Dad's memory and serves this community." "I can see that now," Linda replied, "and I am proud of you for staying committed to your values even when it is difficult." As we prepared to leave the construction site, Frank pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Grayson, I do not usually interfere in people's personal business," he said. "But your father was my friend and I care about your family. Whatever is going on with your wife, do not let anyone convince you to abandon this project. Your dad died believing that construction could make communities stronger. You are proving he was right." Driving back toward town with my mother in the passenger seat, I realized that Sarah's attempts to isolate me from my support system were actually helping me understand who truly understood and valued my work. The community center represented more than just a building project. It embodied a philosophy about how construction could serve as a force for positive change in people's lives. "What are you going to do about Sarah?" Linda asked as we stopped at a red light. "I am going to build the Robert Parker Community Development Center," I said. "And then I am going to see if my marriage can survive the truth about who we really are." My mother nodded, understanding that sometimes the most important choices require us to stand firm in our values, even when the people we love ask us to compromise them. The afternoon sun was beginning to break through the clouds as we drove home, and for the first time since receiving Sarah's ultimatum, I felt confident about the path forward. I arrived home that evening to find Sarah's silver suitcase open on our bed, half filled with neatly folded clothes. The sight stopped me in the doorway as I processed what I was seeing. She moved efficiently between the dresser and the luggage, her movements sharp and purposeful. "You started packing," I observed, setting my keys on the nightstand. "I started packing for both of us," Sarah replied without looking up. Derek called this afternoon with an update on the timeline. "Pinnacle wants me to start Monday, which means we need to be in Seattle by this weekend." "We?" Sarah finally turned to face me, her expression a mixture of determination and exasperation. "Yes, we. I am not moving across the country alone, Grayson. I am trying to save our marriage by making the practical decisions you seem unable to make." I walked to my side of the bed and sat down heavily. Several of my shirts lay folded beside the suitcase, along with my good shoes and the watch Linda had given me for college graduation. "You packed my clothes without asking me." "I packed your interview clothes," Sarah corrected. "You have meetings with 3 Seattle architecture firms next week. Derek arranged them as a favor, though honestly I am not sure you deserve his help after how you have been acting." The presumption behind her actions hit me like a cold wave. While I had been touring the construction site with my mother, Sarah had been making unilateral decisions about our future and presenting them as accomplished facts. "I never agreed to interview with Seattle firms," I said. "You never agreed to have an adult conversation about our future either," Sarah shot back. "So I am handling the logistics myself. Sometimes one partner has to take responsibility when the other partner refuses to participate in important decisions." I noticed that she had also packed the framed photo of my father and me at my college graduation, along with several architectural books from my desk. The careful selection suggested she had thought about which items might convince me to cooperate with her plan. "Where are you planning for us to live in Seattle?" "Derek found us a furnished apartment in Capitol Hill," Sarah said, returning to her packing. 2 bedrooms, walking distance to Pinnacle's offices and close to several architecture firms. The lease starts Sunday." "You signed a lease without discussing it with me." Sarah paused, enfolding a sweater, her jaw tightening. "I put down a deposit to hold the apartment. The lease requires both signatures, obviously. But these places rent quickly, and I did not want to lose the opportunity while you were having your emotional crisis about the community center." "Emotional crisis. That is what Derek called it," Sarah said. "He says it is common for people to have difficulty transitioning between career phases. He recommended a therapist in Seattle who specializes in helping professionals adjust to major life changes." I stared at her, trying to understand when my wife had started taking psychological advice from a man she had known for less than 6 months. The casual way she discussed Derek's analysis of my mental state felt like a betrayal that cut deeper than her career ambitions. "You told your future boss that I am having an emotional crisis." "I told him the truth," Sarah replied. "That you are struggling to make rational decisions about your career because you are emotionally attached to a local construction project. He understood immediately because he has seen it before with other relocating employees." "Other relocating employees," I repeated. "Is that what I am now?" Sarah's expression softened slightly, as if she suddenly realized how her words sounded. "You are my husband, and I love you. But love sometimes means helping someone see past their immediate emotional reactions to make better long-term decisions." My phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Jake's name appeared on the caller ID. "Grayson, I am sorry to bother you at home," Jake said when I answered. "But I just got a strange call from someone at Cascade Design Group in Seattle. They said Sarah had submitted your resume and portfolio for a senior architect position, and they wanted to schedule a phone interview for tomorrow morning." I looked at Sarah, who had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed. "Jake, I will call you back in a few minutes. You submitted my resume to Seattle firms, Shexidi. I sent them your portfolio and a cover letter explaining your experience with sustainable community development," Sarah said defensively. "They were very impressed with your work on the community center. See, your skills are transferable to larger markets. Did you mention that the community center is scheduled to break ground next month and that I have contractual obligations to see the project through completion or—" Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "Derek says all contracts have exit clauses if you know how to use them. The important thing is positioning yourself for better opportunities rather than getting trapped in small-scale projects. The casual way she discussed abandoning my professional commitments made me realize how fundamentally we disagreed about the meaning of integrity and responsibility. For Sarah, contracts and obligations were obstacles to be overcome rather than promises to be honored. "I need to call Jake back," I said, standing and moving toward the living room. "Tell him you will discuss the transition timeline next week," Sarah called after me. "Derek thinks a gradual handoff would be best for everyone involved." I closed the bedroom door behind me and called Jake from the kitchen where I could speak privately. "What exactly did Sarah send to these Seattle firms?" I asked. "A very professional portfolio package," Jake admitted. "Your best project photos, detailed descriptions of your sustainable design approach, and testimonials from previous clients. Honestly, it is impressive marketing material, but Grace and these firms think you are actively seeking employment in Seattle." "I am not actively seeking employment anywhere," I said. "Sarah is making these arrangements without my knowledge or consent." "That puts me in an awkward position," Jake said carefully. "If you are planning to relocate, I need time to prepare for the transition. The community center project alone requires months of on-site supervision and coordination with contractors." "I am not relocating," I said firmly. "I am committed to the community center and to our partnership. Sarah is operating under some assumptions that are not accurate." After ending the call with Jake, I returned to the bedroom to find Sarah on the phone with someone speaking in the animated tone she reserved for professional conversations. "I completely understand the timeline pressure," she was saying. "Yes, Monday would work perfectly. Grayson is very excited about the opportunity to interview with your team." "Sarah, hang up the phone," I said. She held up a finger, gesturing for me to wait. "Of course. Derek mentioned that you specifically requested architects with community development experience. Grayson's background is exactly what you are looking for." "Sarah, hang up the phone now." She finally ended the call and turned to me with an expression of barely contained frustration. "That was Northwest Sustainable Architecture. They want to schedule a video interview for tomorrow afternoon. This is exactly the kind of opportunity Derek said we should expect." "I am not interviewing with Northwest Sustainable Architecture or any other Seattle firm," I said, "and I need you to stop making professional commitments on my behalf." Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "Fine. Sabotage your own career if you want to, but I am not going to let your fear of change destroy my future too. Derek warned me this might happen." "What exactly did Derek warn you about?" "He said that when one partner in a relationship is ready to grow and the other partner is not, it creates a fundamental incompatibility that can be very difficult to resolve." I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I realized the extent of Sarah's conversations with Derek about our marriage. This was not just about career opportunities. Sarah had been building a psychological framework that positioned her as the mature, growth-oriented partner, and me as the fearful obstacle to progress. "How often do you talk to Derek about our relationship?" "Team. We have had several conversations about the challenges of relocating when partners have different levels of ambition and risk tolerance," Sarah said. "He has been very helpful in helping me understand the dynamics at play." "The dynamics at play," I repeated. "And what conclusion did you and Derek reach about these dynamics?" Sarah's expression grew defensive. "He helped me understand that sometimes loving someone means making difficult decisions for the good of the relationship, even when the other person cannot see the bigger picture." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Sarah had not just been planning a career move. She had been building a justification for leaving our marriage while positioning herself as the victim of my inadequacy and selfishness. Derek had provided both the professional opportunity and the psychological framework for her exit strategy. "I think I need some time to process all of this," I said. "Time is exactly what we do not have," Sarah replied. "The Seattle opportunity expires tomorrow, and every day we delay makes the transition more complicated. Derek says that successful people make decisions quickly when presented with clear opportunities." "What about unsuccessful people?" I asked. "What do?" "They overthink things until the opportunities disappear," Sarah said, returning to her packing with renewed energy. Which is exactly what you are doing right now. As I watched my wife fold our life into suitcases based on advice from a man she had known for 6 months, I realized that our marriage had been ending for longer than either of us had acknowledged. The difference was that Sarah had been planning her exit while I had been trying to build our future together. The community center blueprints lay spread across the kitchen table where I had left them that morning. Looking at the detailed drawings of the Robert Parker Community Development Center, I understood that the choice Sarah had presented was not really about geography or career opportunities. It was about fundamental values about what we believed mattered most in life, and about whether love meant supporting each other's authentic dreams or demanding that those dreams be sacrificed for convenience and profit. The next morning, I sat across from Marcus Thompson in his downtown Austin law office, surrounded by legal books and family photos that spoke to a life built on stability and principle. Marcus had been my roommate at UT, and over the past 15 years, he had built a reputation as one of the most ethical family law attorneys in the city. "Let me make sure I understand the situation," Marcus said, reviewing the notes he had taken during my explanation. "Sarah has been making professional and financial commitments on your behalf, without your consent. She has been discussing your marriage with her prospective employer, and she has been systematically undermining your professional relationships." "That sums it up pretty well," I replied. "The question is whether any of this matters legally." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "Texas is a community property state, which means both spouses have equal rights to marital assets. Sarah cannot force you to sell your business partnership or relocate your professional license without your consent. She also cannot legally commit you to employment contracts or lease agreements." "What about the recordings she mentioned?" "If she recorded your private conversations without your knowledge, that could be problematic for her, not you," Marcus explained. "Texas is a one-party consent state for recording, but using edited recordings to misrepresent someone's words or mental state could constitute defamation or fraud." I felt some relief knowing that Sarah's manipulation tactics had limited legal power, but I also realized that the legal aspects were less important than the emotional damage her actions had caused to our relationship. "Marcus, how do marriages survive this kind of deception?" "Honestly, most of them do not," he said. "When one partner systematically manipulates the other while planning an exit strategy, it usually indicates fundamental incompatibility rather than a temporary relationship problem." After leaving Marcus's office, I drove home to find an unfamiliar car in our driveway. Through the living room window, I could see Sarah sitting with an older couple I recognized from wedding photos as her parents, Carol and Robert Chen. I took a deep breath and walked into what felt like an intervention that had been carefully staged without my knowledge. "Grayson, how wonderful to see you," Carol Chen said, rising from the couch to give me a polite hug. At 55, Sarah's mother carried herself with the refined air of someone who had spent her career in corporate finance. Her husband, Robert, a successful real estate developer, remained seated but nodded in my direction. "We came as soon as Sarah told us about the wonderful opportunity in Seattle," Carol continued. "Such an exciting time for you both." "Did Sarah explain the full situation?" I asked, settling into the chair across from them. "She mentioned that you are having some difficulty with the transition," Robert Chen said carefully. "Which is understandable. Career changes can be stressful, especially when they require leaving familiar environments." I looked at Sarah, who was watching the conversation with an expression of carefully controlled anxiety. She had clearly presented a version of events that painted me as the reluctant partner, struggling to adapt to positive change. "What exactly did Sarah tell you about my career situation?" "She said that you have been offered excellent opportunities in Seattle but are hesitant to leave your current projects," Carol replied. "She also mentioned that you might be overly attached to local work in ways that could limit your professional growth." The familiar language of Sarah's manipulation was now being echoed by her parents, confirming my suspicion that she had spent considerable time building her narrative about our relationship problems. "Did she mention the community center project? She said you were working on a local construction project," Robert said, "which sounds like meaningful work, but perhaps not the kind of opportunity that builds long-term financial security." I realized that Sarah had never explained the significance of the community center to her parents, just as she had never truly understood its importance to me. In her version of events, I was clinging to a small project instead of embracing bigger opportunities. The community center will serve 400 families in an underserved neighborhood, I said. It includes job training programs, childcare services, and health clinic facilities. The community is naming it after my father, who died in a construction accident 10 years ago. Carol and Robert exchanged glances, and I could see their perspective shifting as they processed information Sarah had not shared with them. "That sounds like very important work," Carol said quietly. "It is the most meaningful project I have ever been involved with," I replied. "And it is scheduled to break ground next month. I have contractual obligations to the city, to my business partner, and to the community." Sarah's expression grew defensive. "Important work can be done anywhere," she said, "and contracts can be renegotiated if necessary. The point is that Seattle offers opportunities for both of us to grow professionally and financially." "Speaking of financial opportunities," Robert Chen said, reaching into his briefcase, "we brought something that might help with the transition." He handed me a cashier's check for $75,000 made out to Parker and Morrison Architects. "We thought this might help you buy out any business obligations and make the relocation smoother," Robert explained. "Sarah mentioned that your partnership might require some financial restructuring." I stared at the check, understanding that Sarah's parents had arrived prepared to purchase my compliance with their daughter's plan. The amount represented a significant sum, but also revealed how little they understood about the value of what I had built with Jake. "This is very generous," I said carefully. "But my business partnership is worth considerably more than this amount, and more importantly, it represents relationships and commitments that cannot be easily transferred or replaced." "Everything can be negotiated," Robert said confidently. "In my experience, most business problems can be solved with adequate financial incentives and clear timelines." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Maria Santos standing on our front porch, holding a large envelope and accompanied by a young woman I did not recognize. "That is Maria, the community center project manager," I told Sarah. "She said she had something important to discuss today." I opened the door to find Maria beaming with excitement, joined by a young Latina woman in her early 20s. "Grayson, I hope we are not interrupting," Maria said, "but I wanted you to meet Jessica Morales. She is Tommy's girlfriend, and she has something wonderful to share with you." Jessica stepped forward shyly, holding a manila folder. "Mr. Parker, I just wanted to thank you for giving Tommy steady work on the community center. The job training program he is getting through the project helped me qualify for the child care coordinator position." Child care coordinator position. "The community center will include a child care facility for working families," Maria explained. "Jessica completed her early childhood development certification last month, and we want her to manage the program when the center opens." Jessica opened the folder to reveal a hand-drawn thank you card decorated with children's artwork. "The kids in the neighborhood made this for you," she said. "They are so excited about having a safe place to play and learn." I looked at the colorful drawings of swing slides and smiling stick figures playing in green spaces. Each drawing included messages like, "Thank you for our new playground," and "Mr. Grayson is helping our neighborhood." "This is beautiful," I said, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "Please tell the children how much this means to me." "There is more," Maria said, pulling official-looking documents from her envelope. "The city council voted last night to fast-track the groundbreaking ceremony. They want to hold it next Friday with full media coverage and community celebration." As Jessica and Maria explained the details of the groundbreaking ceremony, I became aware of the silence behind me. Sarah and her parents were witnessing firsthand the human impact of the project they had been dismissing as a minor local construction job. After Maria and Jessica left, the living room felt heavy with unspoken tension. "That was very touching," Carol said carefully. "It is clear that your work means a great deal to the community." "It means a great deal to me too," I replied, "which is why abandoning it feels like betraying everything my father believed about the purpose of construction work." Sarah stood abruptly, her composure finally cracking. This is exactly what Derek warned me about, she said. You are so emotionally invested in this project that you cannot think rationally about our future together. Who is Derek? Robert Chen asked. My future supervisor at Pinnacle Marketing, Sarah explained. He has been very helpful in helping me understand the dynamics of our situation. You discussed our marriage with your future boss? Carol asked, her tone suggesting disapproval. Derek has extensive experience with employee relocations, Sarah said defensively. He understands the psychological challenges that arise when couples have different levels of professional ambition. The room fell silent as Sarah's parents processed the revelation that their daughter had been discussing intimate details of her marriage with a professional contact. Even they seemed to recognize the inappropriate nature of such conversations. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown Seattle number. This is Derek Morrison from Pinnacle Marketing. Can we schedule a brief call to discuss Sarah's transition timeline and your relocation plans? I showed the message to Sarah, whose face went pale. You gave Derek my personal phone number. He wanted to touch base about the logistics, Sarah said weakly. He is just trying to be helpful. By contacting your husband directly, Carol asked, her maternal instincts clearly triggered by the inappropriate boundary crossing. As I looked around the room at Sarah's parents holding the cashier's check they had brought to purchase my cooperation, at my wife, who had spent months building an exit strategy while manipulating my family and professional relationships, and at my phone displaying a message from a man who felt entitled to discuss my marriage and career decisions, I realized that the choice Sarah had presented was never really about geography or professional opportunities. It was about whether I would allow myself to be bought, manipulated, and controlled by people who saw my values and commitments as obstacles to be overcome, rather than principles to be respected. That evening, I sat in my truck outside the community center construction site, watching the sun set behind the skeletal framework that would soon become the Robert Parker Community Development Center. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and texts from Sarah, Derek, and various Seattle firms, but I had turned off the ringer and focused on the peace of the construction site. Jake found me there an hour later, parking his pickup beside mine and joining me in contemplative silence as we watched the site security lights illuminate the foundation we had worked so hard to create. Rough day, he asked finally. Sarah's parents brought a cashier's check to buy out my share of the partnership, I said. $75,000. Jake whistled low. That is insulting on multiple levels. The insulting part is not the amount, I said. The insulting part is that they think everything I have built here can be reduced to a financial transaction. We sat in comfortable silence for several more minutes before Jake spoke again. You know I would never pressure you to stay if you really wanted to relocate, he said. But I have to ask, is this what you actually want, or is this what Sarah wants? Sarah wants me to abandon everything I have worked for and follow her to Seattle so she can pursue a career opportunity with a man who thinks he understands our marriage better than we do. Jake turned to look at me directly. What do you want? I want to build the Robert Parker Community Development Center, I said. I want to honor my father's memory and serve this community. I want to work with people who understand the difference between making money and making a difference. Then that is what we are going to do, Jake said simply. Whatever else happens with Sarah, this project moves forward. My phone rang again, this time showing Derek Morrison's Seattle number. I decided to answer it and have the conversation that had been building for days. This is Grayson Parker. Grayson, thank you for taking my call. Derek's smooth voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. I wanted to touch base about the logistics of your relocation and address any concerns you might have about the transition. I appreciate the call, Derek, but I think there has been a misunderstanding. I am not relocating to Seattle. There was a pause before Derek spoke again, his tone shifting slightly. I see. Sarah mentioned that you might need some time to process the career change. It is perfectly natural to feel apprehensive about leaving familiar territory. This is not about apprehension, I said. This is about professional commitments and personal values that cannot be relocated. Grayson, I hope you do not mind me being direct, Derek said. Sarah has shared some details about your current situation, and I am concerned that you might be making decisions based on emotion rather than practical considerations. The architecture opportunities in Seattle far exceed what you can accomplish with small-scale local projects. I felt anger rising in my chest at Derek's presumption that he understood my career better than I did. Derek, I appreciate your concern, but I need you to understand something clearly. My marriage and my career decisions are not your business. I would appreciate it if you would stop discussing either topic with my wife. I think you misunderstand my role here, Derek replied, his tone becoming more assertive. Sarah is a valuable addition to our team, and Pinnacle Marketing has a vested interest in ensuring that our employees are able to transition successfully. When personal relationships interfere with professional performance, it becomes a legitimate business concern. And you see my refusal to abandon my business and follow Sarah to Seattle as interference with her professional performance. I see it as a potential source of stress that could impact her ability to focus on her new responsibilities, Derek said. Sarah is clearly torn between her career opportunity and her loyalty to a husband who seems resistant to supporting her growth. The manipulation in Derek's words was so transparent that I almost laughed. He was positioning himself as the concerned mentor protecting Sarah from a selfish husband, while simultaneously undermining our marriage for his own benefit. Derek, let me be very clear about something, I said. Sarah is an adult who can make her own career decisions without your psychological analysis of our marriage. If she wants to move to Seattle, she is free to do so, but I will not be manipulated into abandoning my life's work because you think it would be convenient for your employee transition plans. I think you are making a mistake that you will regret. Derek said, his mask of professional concern finally slipping. Sarah is an exceptional talent, and she deserves a partner who supports her ambitions rather than holding her back with provincial thinking. What Sarah deserves is a husband who honors his commitments and stands by his values, I replied. If that is not what she wants in a partner, then we have bigger problems than geography can solve. I ended the call and turned to find Jake listening with an expression of barely contained anger. That guy is a piece of work, Jake said. He is not just recruiting Sarah for a job. He is recruiting her away from you. I know, I said. The question is whether Sarah knows it too. We drove back to town in separate vehicles, and I arrived home to find Sarah pacing the living room while her parents sat on the couch, looking uncomfortable. The television played quietly in the background, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. Derek called me after your conversation, Sarah said as soon as I walked in. He said you were hostile and unprofessional. I told him that our marriage is not his business, I replied, which is something you should have told him months ago. Derek has been nothing but helpful and supportive, Sarah said defensively. He understands the complexities of career transitions better than you do. What Derek understands is how to manipulate vulnerable people into making decisions that serve his interests, I said. And what I understand is that I will not be controlled by someone I have never met who thinks he knows what is best for my life. Sarah's father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should give you two some privacy to work through these issues. No, Sarah said quickly. I want you to hear this. Grayson is sabotaging our future because he cannot let go of a local construction project. He would rather cling to the past than build something bigger with me. Sarah, her mother said gently. Earlier today we met the young woman who will coordinate childcare services at the community center, and we saw the children's artwork thanking Grayson for their new playground. This does not sound like clinging to the past. It sounds like building something meaningful for the future. Sarah stared at her mother in shock, clearly not expecting her parents to question the narrative she had constructed about my motivations. You do not understand, Sarah said. Derek explained how emotional attachment to local projects can limit professional growth. Grayson could be working on buildings that serve millions of people instead of hundreds. And Derek's explanation matters more than your husband's perspective, Carol asked pointedly. Before Sarah could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Check your email. Just received some interesting information about Pinnacle Marketing and Derek Morrison. I opened Marcus's email to find a news article from the Seattle Business Journal dated 3 weeks earlier. The headline read, Pinnacle Marketing under investigation for discriminatory hiring practices. The article detailed allegations that Derek Morrison had been recruiting married employees under false pretenses, then creating situations that forced them to choose between their marriages and their careers. Several former employees described a pattern of inappropriate personal involvement in staff members' private lives. I showed the article to Sarah, watching her face as she read about Derek's history of manipulating employees' personal relationships to maintain control over their professional decisions. "This cannot be accurate," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Derek would have mentioned if there were any legal issues with the company." "Would he?" I asked. "Or would he see your situation as another opportunity to demonstrate his power over employees' personal lives?" Sarah sat down heavily, the article still in her hands. For the first time in days, she looked uncertain rather than defensive. "He offered me partnership track after only 6 months," she said quietly. "I thought it was because he recognized my talent." "Maybe it was," I said. "Or maybe it was because he recognized your vulnerability when you told him about problems in your marriage." The room fell silent as Sarah processed the implications of what she was reading. Her parents exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to understand the extent of Derek's manipulation. "Sarah," her father said gently, "did Derek encourage you to discuss your marriage problems with him?" "He said it was normal for relocating employees to need guidance on handling family transitions." Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And did he offer specific advice about how to handle Grayson's resistance to the move?" Sarah nodded slowly, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "He said that sometimes loving someone means making difficult decisions for them when they cannot see the bigger picture." As my wife sat on our couch, finally understanding how thoroughly she had been manipulated by a man who had targeted her professional ambitions and personal insecurities, I realized that Derek Morrison had nearly succeeded in destroying our marriage for his own entertainment and control. The worst part was recognizing that Sarah's willingness to believe Derek's analysis of our relationship revealed fundamental problems that existed long before she received the Seattle job offer. The community center project had simply forced us to confront the reality that we had very different values about what mattered most in life. 6 months later, I stood on the front steps of the Robert Parker Community Development Center as Mayor Rodriguez prepared to cut the ribbon that would officially open the building to the community. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crowd of neighborhood families, construction workers, city officials, and local business owners who had gathered to celebrate the completion of our 3-year project. Tommy Rodriguez, now 20 years old and certified in sustainable construction techniques, stood proudly beside his girlfriend Jessica, who wore a name tag identifying her as the center's child care coordinator. Their 8-month-old daughter slept peacefully in a stroller surrounded by the workplace safety protocols and family-friendly environment that my father had dreamed of creating in the construction industry. Frank Butler, the site foreman who had worked alongside my father 15 years earlier, held a folded American flag that had flown over the construction site throughout the building process. He would present it to my mother Linda as part of the ceremony, honoring Robert Parker's memory and his vision for construction that served community needs. Maria Santos approached the microphone to address the crowd, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza we had designed for outdoor community events. 3 years ago, this neighborhood had no safe place for children to play, no job training programs for young adults, and no accessible health services for working families, Maria said. Today we are opening a facility that will serve over 400 families and provide employment for 150 community members. The crowd applauded as Maria gestured toward the building behind her. The Robert Parker Community Development Center featured sustainable materials, innovative safety systems, and flexible spaces that could accommodate everything from children's birthday parties to adult education classes. This center exists because one architect understood that construction should leave communities stronger than it found them. Maria continued, "Grayson Parker has honored his father's memory by building something that will serve our neighborhood for generations." As Mayor Rodriguez raised the scissors to cut the ribbon, I caught sight of Jake standing near the back of the crowd with our newest associate architects, 3 recent graduates who had joined Parker and Morrison specifically because they wanted to work on community-focused projects. The ribbon fell away, and families began streaming through the front doors to explore the Child Care Center Computer Lab Health Clinic and multi-purpose rooms that would host everything from job training programs to senior citizen activities. Linda Parker found me inside the main community room, which featured a bronze plaque dedicating the center to Robert Parker's memory and his belief that construction could be a force for positive change in people's lives. "Your father would be so proud," she said, tears streaming down her face as she watched children playing on the indoor playground we had designed with advanced safety features. This is exactly what he believed construction should accomplish. Through the large windows that overlooked the outdoor playground, I could see Tommy leading a tour for a group of teenagers who were considering enrollment in the center's construction apprentice program. The sight filled me with satisfaction that went far beyond any professional recognition or financial reward. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news coverage of the community center opening. "Congratulations on completing such a meaningful project." Yeah, Sarah. I had not heard from Sarah since our divorce was finalized 4 months earlier. She had moved back to Connecticut after Derek Morrison was terminated from Pinnacle Marketing, and the Seattle job offer was withdrawn during the company's investigation into discriminatory hiring practices. The divorce proceedings had been surprisingly amicable once Sarah understood the extent of Derek's manipulation and recognized her own role in nearly destroying our marriage. She kept the money in our joint savings account, and I kept the business and our shared commitment to treating each other with dignity, despite our fundamental incompatibility. "Mr. Parker." A young voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find a girl of about 8 years old holding a hand-drawn picture of the community center. "I wanted to give you this," she said shyly. "My mom says you helped build our new playground." The drawing showed stick figures playing on swings and slides under a bright yellow sun, with "Thank you, Mr. Grayson" written in purple crayon across the top. "This is beautiful," I said, kneeling to her level. "What is your name?" "Emma," she replied. "My mom works in the health clinic, and I come to the after-school program every day. I love the indoor playground when it rains." As Emma ran back to join her friends, I realized that this moment represented everything I had been trying to build since my father's death 10 years earlier. The community center embodied his values about worker safety, community service, and construction that improved people's lives rather than simply generating profit. Jake approached as the afternoon celebration was winding down, carrying a manila envelope that looked official. "This came in yesterday's mail," he said with a grin. "The American Institute of Architects wants to present you with their Community Impact Award at next month's national conference." I opened the envelope to find a letter praising the Robert Parker Community Development Center as an exemplary model of sustainable architecture that prioritized community benefit over commercial profit. The award included an invitation to speak at the conference about integrating social responsibility into architectural practice. "They want me to give a presentation about community-focused design," I said, scanning the letter's details. "You should accept," Jake said. "Your father's story and this project could inspire other architects to think differently about their role in community development." As the sun began to set over Austin, I walked through the nearly empty community center, checking the security systems and turning off lights in rooms that had been filled with celebration just hours earlier. The building felt peaceful and purposeful, ready to begin its real work of serving the neighborhood families who would use it every day. My phone rang as I locked the front door. The caller ID showed Dr. Patricia Williams, the counselor I had been seeing monthly since my separation from Sarah. "Grayson, I saw the news coverage of the community center opening," Dr. Williams said. "How are you feeling about reaching this milestone?" "Grateful," I said without hesitation, and clear about what matters most to me. "What does matter most to you?" I looked back at the building that bore my father's name, thinking about Tommy's apprenticeship program, Jessica's child care services, the health clinic that would serve uninsured families, and the playground where children could play safely. "Building something larger than myself," I said. "Creating opportunities for other people to succeed. Honoring the values my father taught me about work and community service." And what have you learned about relationships through this experience? I considered the question as I walked to my truck, which was parked under the street light that illuminated the bronze dedication plaque. I learned that the right partner supports your dreams rather than demanding that you abandon them, I said. I learned that manipulation disguised as love is actually control and fear. And I learned that true success means building something meaningful rather than just accumulating wealth or status. After ending the call with Dr. Williams, I drove slowly through the neighborhood that surrounded the community center. Porch lights were coming on in small houses where families were settling in for evening routines that would now include access to childcare, job training, health services, and safe recreational space. At a red light 3 blocks from the center, I noticed a young couple pushing a stroller past the new playground area. The woman pointed toward the community center and said something to her partner that made him smile. They paused to read the bronze plaque that honored my father's memory, then continued their evening walk. This was what my father had envisioned when he talked about construction that left places better than you found them. Not just buildings that provided shelter or commercial space, but structures that strengthened communities and created opportunities for people to build better lives. My phone chimed with a notification from the Austin Business Journal announcing that Parker and Morrison Architects had been selected to design a second community center for the east side of Austin. The project would incorporate lessons learned from the Robert Parker Center and expand our model of community-focused, sustainable architecture. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I realized that the choice Sarah had forced me to make 6 months earlier had led to the most fulfilling period of my professional life. By refusing to abandon my values for the sake of convenience or profit, I had discovered work that aligned completely with my sense of purpose and meaning. The apartment I now rented was smaller than the house Sarah and I had shared, but it was filled with architectural models, community planning documents, and photos from construction sites where safety and sustainability were the highest priorities. The space reflected my authentic priorities rather than compromise solutions that satisfied no one completely. Before bed, I checked my email to find messages from 3 architectural firms in other Texas cities asking about consultation services for community development projects. Word was spreading about the Robert Parker Center's innovative approach to sustainable design that prioritized social impact over pure profit margins. I also found an email from Jessica Morales with photos from the center's first day of childcare services. 23 children had enrolled in the program, and their parents were already expressing gratitude for having access to high-quality, affordable care in their own neighborhood. As I turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, I thought about the question that would guide my presentation at the National Architects Conference. How do we build structures that strengthen communities rather than just serving individual interests? The answer I had learned required the same principles that governed healthy relationships. Mutual respect, shared values, long-term thinking, and the understanding that true success comes from lifting others up, rather than simply advancing your own position. My father had died believing that construction could be a force for positive change in people's lives. The Robert Parker Community Development Center proved that he was right. The young families using the childcare services, the teenagers learning construction skills, the seniors attending health screenings, and the children playing safely in well-designed spaces all represented the continuation of his vision. Sarah had been wrong about one thing: I was not clinging to the past by honoring my father's memory. I was building the future he had imagined but never lived to see. The difference between looking backward and moving forward sometimes depends entirely on whether you understand that the best dreams are worth fighting for, especially when other people try to convince you to abandon them. 6 months ago, I had faced a choice between love and dreams. Today, I understood that the right choice was refusing to accept that false dilemma. Real love supports authentic dreams, and authentic dreams create opportunities for others to build meaningful lives. The Robert Parker Community Development Center would serve families for decades to come, providing a foundation for community growth that honored both innovation and tradition. That was the kind of legacy worth building, the kind of work that made getting up each morning feel like a privilege rather than an obligation. As I drifted off to sleep, I could hear the sounds of the neighborhood settling into evening routines around a community center that had transformed their access to opportunity and hope. Tomorrow, I would begin planning the second center, continuing work that connected my daily efforts to something larger than individual success or recognition. My father had been right about construction. When you build something with integrity, community service, and long-term vision, you create structures that strengthen the foundation for everyone who comes after you. That principle applied equally to buildings and relationships, to careers and marriages, to the daily choices that determine whether we contribute to something meaningful or simply consume what others have created. The community had named the center after Robert Parker, but the real monument to his memory was the ongoing work of proving that construction could serve community needs while maintaining the highest standards of safety, sustainability, and social responsibility. That work would continue as long as people believed that building something meaningful was worth the effort required to do it right. Have you ever faced a situation where someone asked you to choose between your dreams and your relationships? How did you handle the pressure to compromise your core values for the sake of keeping peace with people you loved? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about standing up for what matters most, even when the people closest to us do not understand our choices. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to stay true to their values when facing difficult decisions. Thank you for joining me in honoring the memory of all the Robert Parkers who believed that work should serve community needs, and that building something meaningful is always worth the effort required to do it right. May you find the courage to build foundations that will strengthen your community for generations to come.